So this isn't your father's Stanford football team, but they're still pretty smart about the way they play football up there on the farm. We're going to find out if that's good enough to beat this year's USC team on this episode of Locked On USC.
You are Locked On Trojans, your daily podcast on the USC Trojans, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Fight on, everyone. I'm your host, Marc, and thanks for making Locked On USC your first listen every day. Whether you're watching on YouTube or wherever you download your podcast, we're free. And I thank you for coming along for the ride. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that red subscribe button. It means a lot. And if you're just listening for free on one of your favorite podcast platforms, go ahead and hit me up on Twitter at Marc and tell me what you like about the show. Tell me what you don't like about the show. I want to first apologize for the yesterday's episode getting a late start. We had some technical difficulties. Hopefully that has been cleared up. However, we're going to get started on our first stop of the Revenge Tour for USC football in 2022. As you know, last year, Stanford essentially started the Lincoln Riley era process when they came into the Coliseum and knocked off USC 42-28, ending the Clay Helton era. And I know a lot of people are very grateful to Stanford for finally making that come to fruition. However, it's also become a tradition for Stanford and USC to meet up first game of the conference play, whether that's at the Coliseum or this year up there in Northern California, up on the farm. So both teams are 1-0 this year. Just a real quick recap. USC knocked off Rice 66-14, and Stanford handled Colgate at home 41-10. Now, quick note, USC has beaten, they haven't beaten Stanford up there since 2014, and the Trojans are only 5-9 against the Cardinal overall since 2009. So they've always been a thorn in their side, so to speak. As I mentioned, last year, Stanford ended the Clay Helton era. This year, USC is in the top 10, heading up there with Lincoln Riley and a different culture and a different personality and players who, again, we mentioned this on the show yesterday. Eric Gentry said it very eloquently. He didn't come to USC to beat Rice or Stanford. He came to USC to win a national championship. So that's how they're approaching this game. It's just Stanford. It's just another game in the process. Stanford, we know USC warmed up against Rice fairly easily. Stanford, the final score showed 41-10. They had an easy time with their opponent, but it wasn't as easy as USC's game. USC collected 4 turnovers against Rice. Stanford actually turned the ball over 4 times against their opponent. So that's not a good sign. Hopefully both those trends will continue. Pardon me. And, like I said, this isn't your typical Stanford team that, they come in and they're just going to try and beat you with brute brute and brute strength and their man, it's late. I'm sorry. And their brains. Turn mine on, right? Anyway, what if I told you that last year it wasn't USC who finished dead last in conference in rushing? It was the Stanford Cardinal. Well, it's true. They averaged as a team. The Stanford Cardinal. That's what I said. This isn't your father's team. Your father's Stanford team. They averaged less than 88 yards per game. not good. But there's still, they're always going to be that program who's thought of, as I was trying to spit the words out earlier, they're going to want to, beat you on the ground, running the ball, and they want to kind of, be more physical than you are. But, if you look back, it's not who they are anymore. They're just not that team. So, again, 9th in the conference rushing over the last 3 years is, I think, of what they're averaging. And last year, dead last. And it was USC that, they embarrassed. And that just shows you how poorly USC was playing last year. USC had 4 wins. Stanford, I think, finished with 3 wins. Yikes. I know they finished the year on a 7-game losing streak. So the game against Colgate was their first win in quite a while. So if USC can stop that Stanford ground game, it's going to fall on the shoulders of Stanford's quarterback Tanner McKee, who I mentioned he's considered a first-round draft pick. He's got that type of talent, and against Colgate, he was 22 for 27, 300 yards, a couple of touchdowns, but he did contribute to one of those 4 turnovers with an interception. Also, remember, he got his first career start against USC last year in LA, and he showed out pretty well. 16 for 23, 234 yards, a couple touchdowns, and he also ran for 1. So you can see that he's got the talent. He's already familiar with USC's personnel, and we're going to see if he can repeat what he did last year. If he does, that might not be good news for the Trojans or their fans making the trip up to Palo Alto. I'll be there. So while, keep in mind, he's not Tanner isn't, like Caleb Williams. He's not considered a significant running threat, but he has good pocket awareness. He can move around, and if he needs to take off and pick up a first down, he'll move the chains to keep the drive going. The running game is basically going to come down between E.J. Smith and Casey Filkins. As we mentioned on yesterday's episode, Emmett's kid, EJ, had an 87-yard touchdown run on the first play of the game, but not much there after that. So if, again, let's make Stanford beat USC through the air. And that they could pose a challenge for USC there. They've got, USC might have one of the best wide receiver groups in the country. However, Stanford might have one of the bigger wide receiver groups in the country. Across the board, these guys are, we're looking 6'3", 6'2", 6'4", 6'5", 6'2". That's not bad. USC's secondary, they've got some good size at the safety group. And at cornerback, they brought in Mekhi Blackman from Colorado. Sia Wright he started the first game. He's well over 6 foot, 6'1", 6'2", right in there. So they can match up. But will they be able to match up when Stanford goes to those jump ball situations that they're famous for, both in the end zone and along the sidelines? And if Stanford is able to hit on those, we'll see, if they're able, to control the clock. If David Shaw recognizes, hey, we've got an advantage here, and now he can control the way that the tempo is played by saying, all right, first, second down, we try and run or play the short passing game. Even if we're in second mid and third and long, I've got size advantage with my receivers against the secondary. He might try and play that card to see how it works out. It's a chess game. We'll see. Against Colgate, Stanford's leading receiver, Michael Wilson. How'd he do? He had 5 receptions for 82 yards and a couple of touchdowns. John Humphreys what is he? He's 6'4", 212 pounds. Mike Wilson, 6'2", 210. Humphreys had 4 catches for 88 yards. So, again, it's going to be interesting to see if USC's defense can force Stanford to play the way to get out of their comfort zone. It'll be interesting to see how that works out. Much like USC, the tight end for Stanford wasn't really a factor against Colgate. They probably didn't need to use them, and that's why. I think they had 1 reception out of that group, and it went for 1 yard. So there you go. But again, Stanford always has some talented tight ends, and more than likely they will be more involved in the offensive philosophy or the game plan this weekend. So will the USC linebackers and safeties be able to control, again, Stanford's size? That's what they're known for. But that's also usually when Stanford has one of those dominant offensive lines. And again, Stanford hasn't been there lately. They do have some talent. You might recognize Walter Rouse. I know USC went after him. He's their starting left tackle. You've got Jake Hornibrook at starting left guard. Drake Nugent, your starting center. Branson Bragg at right guard, and Miles Hinton at right tackle. So 318, 308, 300, 315, and 320 going left to right. So again, it's a veteran line, and but they're just not producing that first line NFL talent like I think everyone's been accustomed to over the last decade. The last half a decade, they just haven't been there. So we'll see if USC is able to make sure that Stanford doesn't look like the old Stanford of old. Now, they were good enough to protect Tanner McKee, kept him upright, kept his uniform clean, so they didn't give up a sack. However, they did give up 5 tackles for loss. And Stanford they are coming off a year where they gave up 31 sacks last year. So can the USC Russians take advantage? Corey Foreman, Romello Haight, Tuli Tuipulotu, are they going to be able to create some havoc? This will be a great time to do it on national TV. So again, big step up from Rice. But if USC truly is a top 10 team and they're capable of winning the Pac-12 this season, then you know what? I think this is probably an offensive line that USC should be able to take care of. Definitely a line you want to check out is head over to betonline.net because they're your number one source. Okay, there we go. For all of your pro and college football betting needs and sports information this season, find all of the latest football league developments, game matchups, news, and podcasts, including this year's opening week's games. BetOnline is your continued source for all of your sports wagering information, including live betting, esports, and scores. The fastest and easiest way to check in on all of your favorite sports and events, including Major League Baseball, MMA, boxing, golf. Head on over to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more about the trends and action. BetOnline, where the game starts. So on the other side of the ball for Stanford, they return experience. 9 of their 12 listed starters are either seniors or fifth-year players, and that includes the back 7. So this is a defense that, because they have experience, especially in that secondary, they like to leave those corners on an island. Let's just go over that secondary real quick. You've got Caillou Blue Kelly, who took care of USC by himself last year. he had finished with 7 tackles, 4 pass deflections, as well as a pick 6 for 31 yards. Ethan Bonner, Patrick Fields, I'll get into him here in a little bit, Kendall Williamson, and Jonathan McGill. The secondary, look, USC has a wide receiver group that causes a lot of problems. And they've got a play caller that knows how to create problems for the opposition. I'm going to give the advantage here back to USC, even with Caillou Blue Kelly returning and Patrick Fields coming in over from Oklahoma to Stanford. I just think that with the talent that USC has on the outside, and you got a legitimate running game to go against the Stanford defense with Austin Jones, Travis Dye, Darwin Barlow, Ray Leak Brown, and once again, Graham Harrell isn't calling plays. You have Caleb Williams at quarterback. This is just a much more dynamic offense than Stanford, I think, is going to be capable of dealing with. But it's going to come down to, again, who can control both sides of the ball in the trenches. And if you do that, then you're going to control the tempo of the game. USC just needs to have those extra possessions. 2 or 3 extra, they're going to win, in my opinion. So, again, they're up front, they're young on the edges. And so that might be a fun battle to watch, USC's offensive line, because USC's offensive line is very experienced. Again, your starters, we're assuming left tackle is going to be Cortland Ford, left guard Andrew Voorhees, Brett Nylon at center, right guard Justin Dietich, Jonah Monheim at right tackle. So Cortland Ford, Bobby Haskins will be doing that rotating thing. They're going to be going up against Stephen Herron, and you might recognize the name David Bailey. USC was recruiting him out of Mater Dei. He's actually starting and playing as a freshman at Stanford. So 2 ways of looking at it. 1, he's a very talented young man. 2, and I think this is where you should probably underline, the fact that Stanford's relying on a freshman says that Stanford hasn't been recruiting and developing the talent that, again, we've been more accustomed to. When I go back to this, isn't your father's Stanford team? They're going through a transition, and whether or not David Shaw just hasn't found those players, or that he hasn't, the coaches haven't been developing those type of players, something has been amiss with Stanford these last 5 or so years. So hopefully they don't find their mojo again on Saturday. Against Colgate, those guys actually were able to put up 160 yards of rushing on 31 carries. It's a 4.1 clip. USC should be able to match that. If USC's running the ball 30 times, they're winning the game, and probably handedly. We know that Lincoln likes to keep his offense balanced, but 30 run plays, to me, against Stanford would be a significant number. We'll see. We'll see how that plays out. At linebacker for Stanford, they go. Their starters are Jacob Magnum Farrar, Lavani Demuni, and Ricky Maizan. Against in their first game, Demuni led the team in tackles. I guess by a wide margin. So we'll see how these guys do. Again, I didn't get to really see much of that Stanford Colgate game, so I can't put a lot of my own spin on it. But just looking at the numbers and reading some of the breakdown, I think everyone would agree and believe that USC has better talent across the board than Colgate. And yeah, USC and Stanford, for them, they probably use a very vanilla game plan against 2 very overmatched opponents. So we'll see if David Shaw is willing to open up the playbook on both sides of on the ball. How exotic is he willing to get on defense? Again, they've never had to account for a quarterback at USC like a Caleb Williams. This is a new something new for David Shaw as well. I personally think this is going to be, when USC goes into halftime, they're already going to have covered their, I believe at betonline.net, it was USC was open at 10.5. I think USC is already going to cover that, and they're going to pull away in the second half and win rather easily. And then special teams, I think this is an advantage for USC. Again, in their opening game, Stanford was, muffing the ball. Twice they were unable to do it on the punt return. One of them, Colgate recovered. And Stanford only returned 2 kickoffs for 13 yards. That's not good. There's 7 punt returns, 7 punt return yards on 6 attempts. That's even worse. I'm going to give the advantage on special teams to USC. Hopefully we don't see Stanford doing a lot of punt returns. So maybe they get the advantage. Who knows? If USC's not punting the ball, that means they're scoring touchdowns. And hopefully they're not turning it over the old-fashioned way. All right? So there you go. Offense, defensive breakdowns. I think everybody anticipates USC and Stanford having a feeling out process for those first couple of series. USC on the road. Hey, if USC wins the coin toss, will Lincoln Riley want to go on offense again? I think that's his personality. He's going to want to test that Stanford defense to see what they're all about so he can make some adjustments. If Stanford wins the coin toss, do they want to be on defense first? Will they defer? Again, it's a chess game. Who's going to control the line of scrimmage? That's going to determine the game, and it will determine the tempo of the game. Let's go over some news and notes before we get out of here for this week of Locked On USC. Always 5 episodes. You get me? 5 days a week. So on the injury note, it's been a kind of a, we talk about it, we don't. Let me reiterate. If Lincoln Riley mentions a name publicly, we can talk about the injuries, the injury report, who will possibly play, who won't. So Rayleigh Brown's name was brought up Thursday when we spoke to Lincoln after practice via Zoom. And he was asked about his availability. And he says, I wouldn't be close to ruling anybody out at this point, end quote. Okay, so a little vague. I'm going to throw my 2 cents into this. When I saw Rayleigh on Wednesday, if I was a betting guy, I would say he's going to be given a chance to show what he can do. How much opportunity, we'll find out in the game. As far as Dejon Benton, the other known injured starter, again, you heard Lincoln Riley's response to the question. I'm leaning towards we probably won't see him, and hopefully we don't need him. Let's develop, let's see what we've got. I know the depth is thin, but let's see what's behind Dejon. Nick Figueroa should be able to get the job done. Solo Tuliaupupu has been getting rave reviews from his defensive coordinator, Alex Grinch. And I think we saw glimpses of what he did last year. Corey Foreman, Romello Haight, rush in, go get the quarterback. Hey, if Colgate can get 5 TFLs, I expect USC to match that number, minimum. And let's get out of there with a few sacks. Let's introduce Tanner McKee to the turf, right? Remember, this is a revenge tour. Make them feel the pain that USC and their fans had to feel last year at home. It's not a good feeling. Patrick Fields, I mentioned his name earlier. So he came in to Stanford from Oklahoma. He was one of Oklahoma's captains. And he started all 13 games for Lincoln and Alex Grinch in 2021 and finished with 80 tackles and 2 interceptions. So, as you know, USC brought in Austin Jones from Stanford. So those two kind of cancel each other out as far as having knowledge of each other and spreading that information to their coaching staffs. Alex Grinch and Lincoln Riley both spoke really highly of Patrick Fields. So you know he's a very special player. And hopefully their USC football staff is accounting for him on Saturday, not letting him make plays against his former coaches. That wouldn't be good. On the recruiting front, real quick, I'm sure everybody has heard by now, Braxton Myers, the defensive back from Texas, has decommitted from USC. Look, people can speculate. There's lots of reasons why players decommit. Fans see highlight reels and say, "Oh man, that guy's a 4-star." That's what the recruiting ranking says. We got to have him. Coaches look at things a little bit differently. They don't look at the highlight films. They look at game film, and they're looking for, how's a player reacting to a play? Did he get beat? What was his body language? How did he react on a good play? What's he doing on the sideline when his team is on offense? Is he giving 100% effort if he's not involved in the play on the field? Those are the things that, the coaching staff is looking at. And, if the coaches aren't seeing those things, messages get back to recruits very quickly. And sometimes recruits, they might want to stay home. They might find out that distance plays a factor. Again, recruiting, there's a lot of stuff that goes on behind the scenes. So don't always look for something negative. You just kind of have to roll with it. Recruiting is very fluid. And you don't, as a USC fan, don't worry about USC recruiting with Lincoln Riley as the head coach. You just don't have to be concerned. So take a deep breath. You're going to get a decommit. But you're also probably going to get a commitment. You really need to head out when you're done making Locked On USC your first listen. Make sure you head on over to wearesc.com and check out Scott Schrader. He's got some recruiting information for you regarding Jason Mitchell. Will he or will he not reclassify for the 2023 class? He's the super athlete from Serra in Gardena, California. His father played wide receiver at USC. So, a legacy player. All right, we're going to get out of here for this week. Not a whole lot more we can really talk about. We've gone over, USC, their big win against Rice. We've broken down USC versus Stanford. I've got USC winning big. You can head on over to, again, WeRSC and read my yay or nay column for my official score prediction. But trust me, they win handedly. Until we meet again, everyone here, you know what to do.